The encounter. Caruel moved silently through the underbrush, every step calculated, every breath measured. His people were hunters by birth, predators who had ruled their world long before spaceflight. The rhythm of stalking, the anticipation of a kill, was as natural to him as drawing breath. Today, though, he was far from his homeworld. The dense forests of this backwater colony world were not his territory, but hunger and instinct were the same everywhere. It was then that he heard it, a thin, high-pitched wail. Not the cry of prey he knew. Not the guttural squeal of a beast, or the shriek of some winged scavenger. This sound was alien, fragile, and, strangest of all, persistent. Caruel followed it, his senses sharpening. Through the trees, in a shallow gully, he found the source. A small creature, pale-skinned and soft, wrapped in torn fabric. It was seated on the ground, its face streaked with dirt and tears. It rocked back and forth, clutching a stick as though it were a weapon. A human cub. Caruel had seen humans before, though never this close, and never so vulnerable. Adults of the species traveled the stars in their flimsy metal ships, daring to claim worlds that should have belonged to hunters. They were not strong, not fast, not armed with claws or fangs. Yet somehow they survived. This one, though, tiny, helpless, separated from its pack, should not have survived at all. The cub looked up at him. Wide eyes, wet with tears, fixed on Caruel's towering, scaled frame. And then, impossibly, it did not scream. It did not run. It simply reached out a hand. Caruel froze. No prey had ever done that. He might have ended it then, quick and merciful. A snap of his jaws, and silence would fall again. But something stirred in him, a confusion that made his claws twitch uselessly. The forest itself chose for him. A rustle, a growl, and from the shadows leapt a feral beast of this world, jaws gaping wide. The child screamed at last, a thin, desperate sound. Caruel moved without thought. He struck, claws raking, jaws tearing. The beast fell in moments, twitching before it went still. Blood dripped from Caruel's teeth. The cub was silent now, staring at him with a strange expression, not fear, but awe. Slowly, shakily, it crawled closer and pressed its tiny body against his leg. Caruel stiffened. He was no den guardian. His people birthed their young and left them to fend for themselves. The weak perished, the strong endured. That was the law of predators. Yet here was a fragile creature that should have been meat, clinging to him as though he were its protector. "This is not what hunters do," he muttered in his own tongue, though the cub could not understand. He tried to pull away, but the little thing followed, stumbling on unsteady legs. Its tiny hands gripped his clawed fingers, unafraid of talons that had just ended another predator's life. Caruel considered leaving it. Alone, the cub would not last a night. But the thought of those wide eyes dimming, of that strange trust betrayed, gnawed at him. So he lifted it, awkwardly, cradling it against his chest plates. It was so light, so fragile, that he could feel its heartbeat fluttering like a bird's. The cub settled there with a sigh, as though this monstrous alien body were the safest place in the universe. Caruel exhaled slowly. His hunt was over, and something far stranger had begun. He walked deeper into the forest, the cub nestled against him. Predators hunted, yes. They killed, they survived. But never before had one carried prey in his arms. Never before had prey looked at him not with terror, but with trust. And Caruel, for the first time in his life, felt the uneasy weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The predator learns. The journey back toward the highlands was slow. Caruel had not intended to keep the cub, yet every step deeper into the forest bound them together. He was a hunter, not a herdsman, but the tiny creature forced his pace to a crawl. Its legs were too short, its body too fragile. Often, he had to carry it. At first, he carried it as one might a bundle of supplies, awkwardly tucked beneath an arm. But the cub protested, squirming, whining, reaching for his chest until, with a snarl of frustration, Caruel held it there instead. The small creature promptly settled, pressing its face against the armor of his chest plates as though it had found safety. Safety, in him. The thought gnawed at him. On the second day, hunger gnawed too. Caruel hunted and brought down a four-legged grazer. As he tore into the flesh, The cub made noises, soft, insistent whimpers. He ignored it at first, but the sound persisted until it shuffled forward and tugged at the meat with its tiny hands. Caruel hissed, "You cannot eat this raw." But of course, the cub did not understand. He considered letting it try, to learn nature's harsh lesson, but something inside him rebelled. Instead, he set the meat aside and tried something he had seen humans do once around a campfire. He used his wrist flamer to sear the flesh, charring it until it gave off a scent unlike raw blood. The cub brightened immediately, clapping its little hands before gnawing happily on the scorched strip. Caruel watched, strangely unsettled. The cub had no fangs, no claws, yet it had survived long enough to demand food cooked by fire. Weak, and yet stubborn. That night, the cub whimpered again. Cold, perhaps, or afraid. Caruel tried to ignore it, curling into his own rest posture. But the noise grew, worming into his skull. Finally, with a growl, he drew the small body against his side. Instantly, the sound ceased. Warmth radiated from the child, and for the first time in cycles, Caruel slept deeply. On the third day, he found himself speaking aloud. Not to himself, no, to the cub. "You should not trust me," he muttered as he carried it over rough terrain. "I am Claws and Fangs. I was meant to end you." The cub only babbled in response, a string of meaningless syllables. Then it laughed, clear and high, like birdsong. Caruel stumbled, nearly losing his footing. He had never heard such a sound. It was not fear, not aggression. It was joy. That laugh echoed in his head long after it stopped. By the fourth day, he noticed the way it followed him without hesitation, even when he set it down to forage. Its steps wobbled, it tripped often, yet it rose each time, stubbornly trailing after him. It looked at him not as a monster, but as something to be trusted. As if, in the child's eyes, Claws and Fangs meant protection, not threat. It was madness. His people did not protect the weak. They cast them aside. Strength was survival. Yet this cub forced him to be more than predator. That night, as the cub slept nestled against his chest, Caruel studied its tiny features in the dim glow of starlight. Soft skin, small nose, delicate fingers curled into his armor plates. So fragile. So impossibly fragile. And yet, it had endured. Perhaps because it believed it would endure. Perhaps because of him. He closed his eyes and whispered words he had never thought to speak. "You are not prey. Not any more." The trial. The storm broke on the fifth night. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolled like the growl of some colossal beast, and the forest floor turned to mire. Caruel sheltered beneath a rock overhang, the cub pressed tight against him, its small body trembling at each flash. He should have abandoned it days ago. That was the thought that returned with every thunderclap. His pack, if he had ever had one, would have laughed at him. A hunter burdening himself with prey? Madness. Yet when the cub whimpered, his claws instinctively tightened around it. The storm could rage and the world could burn. He would not let it be taken. The real danger came at dawn. They were moving through the wet underbrush when the scent reached him, sharp, acrid, the stink of hunters on the wind. He froze, nostrils flaring. This was no grazing beast. These were predators, a pack of 6, fanged and swift. He had seen them before, tearing through prey with coordinated precision. Alone, he might test his skill against them. With the cub. Impossible. But the pack had already encircled. Shadows slipped through the trees, eyes gleaming. The cub sensed the threat, clutching at his armor and whispering in its soft voice, "Caruel." The sound shocked him. It was not babble this time. It was his name, shaped by a human tongue. The cub had claimed him. A growl rose in his throat. No hunter claimed Caruel. No beast marked him. But this cub, this fragile scrap of life, had spoken, and something inside him roared in answer. The first predator lunged. Caruel spun, claws tearing across its throat. Hot blood sprayed, but another came from behind, snapping jaws catching his shoulder. Pain seared through him. He fought on, driving his elbow back, crushing bone. He had no time for finesse. Every strike was desperation, every motion a shield between the cub and the pack. He fought not as a lone hunter, but as something else, something unrecognizable even to himself. The cub screamed when claws raked across Caruel's side. He staggered, nearly dropping it, but forced himself upright. He bared his fangs at the circling predators and snarled, "You will not have it! Not while I breathe." They pressed harder. Teeth sank into his leg, another slashed across his ribs. Caruel roared, tore one free, snapped another spine. But blood loss made his vision swim. His limbs grew heavy. At last, the final two predators retreated into the brush, wary of the frenzy he had unleashed. He swayed, gasping, every wound burning. His legs folded, and he sank to the ground, cradling the cub close. This was it. His strength was gone. He had fought the pack and lived, but not for long. The cub crawled against him, tiny hands pressing at his wounds, trying to stanch the bleeding. It made soft noises, crying, pleading. He felt water dripped against his lips, offered from its own small flask. The cub tried to guard him. The realization struck harder than claws. The weak was protecting the strong. The prey was tending the predator. By every law of nature he knew, this was impossible. And yet, here it was, refusing to abandon him. Caruel felt a low rumble in his chest, something between a growl and a laugh. "Foolish little one," he rasped. "You guard me." The cub pressed its forehead against his scaled chest, as though answering yes. For the first time in his life, Caruel understood that strength was not merely in the claw or fang. It was in this strange, stubborn refusal to let another fall. Guardianship. Sacrifice. These were the weapons humans carried. Bleeding, half-conscious, he whispered a vow into the storm-chilled air. "As long as I draw breath, no harm will come to you." And for once, he did not feel like a predator at all. He felt something more. Why they guard their own. Caruel limped through the forest, the cub secured in the crook of his good arm. His wounds burned, each step leaving a dark trail behind him. He had no destination, only the stubborn drive to keep moving, to keep the child safe. The cub stirred, rubbing its small hand against his scaled chest as though urging him on. He could not fail it now. By the second night, his strength was nearly spent. He found shelter beneath a ridge and collapsed, curling around the child to keep it warm. He expected not to wake. But fate had other plans. At dawn, the air vibrated with an unfamiliar hum. Engines. Caruel's eyes snapped open to see lights cutting through the trees, metallic figures descending on repulsor craft. Humans. The cub recognized them first. Its eyes lit up, and it cried out in a clear, desperate tone, "Mama! Papa!" Caruel froze. From the craft emerged two humans, armored but unarmed, their faces contorted in raw emotion. They ran forward, voices breaking with sobs as they gathered the cub into their arms. The child laughed and clung to them, babbling words Caruel could not understand. But he understood the meaning well enough. This was not just a cub. This was theirs. Their young, their blood, their heart. Caruel tried to rise, but his legs failed him. The humans noticed him at last. Weapons were raised, eyes hardening as they saw the predator crouched nearby, blood-stained and battered. He knew what they saw, a beast who might have harmed their child. Yet the cub wriggled free from its parent's arms and toddled straight back to him, tiny hands grabbing at his clawed fingers. It pressed its face against him with complete trust. The humans halted. Their eyes shifted from the child's unshaken trust to Caruel's mangled form. Weapons lowered. Confusion warred with gratitude on their faces. One of them knelt, female, judging by her voice. She spoke softly, though Caruel understood no words. Yet her eyes said enough. "You protected what we could not." Her mate placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of respect, even reverence. They bowed their heads to him. Caruel blinked, stunned. In his world, only the strong earned respect. But here, it was not the kill that mattered. It was the shield. They treated him, their medics working quickly despite his growls of protest. Strange warmth flowed into his veins from their machines, knitting wounds he thought mortal. The cub stayed near, watching with wide, bright eyes, never once letting go of his hand. When strength returned, Caruel sat apart, observing. The humans surrounded their cub with such intensity, feeding it, soothing it, holding it close. Every hand, every glance was protection. They guarded not because the child was strong, but because it was theirs. And when he looked closer, he realized it extended beyond the family. Every human there guarded each other, moving as a pack, not predators, but guardians. Injured soldiers were tended with the same care, supplies shared without hesitation. It was a kind of strength he had never known, the strength of many bound by loyalty, by love. That night, the human leader approached him. Words meant little, but the gesture was clear, a hand pressed to the chest, then extended outward. Gratitude. Recognition. Caruel looked at the cub, who nestled safely in its mother's arms now, but still smiled at him as though he belonged. And for the first time, he understood. Humans were not strong because of claws or fangs. They were strong because they guarded their own. They made even the weakest among them endure, not by abandoning them, but by surrounding them with protection until they too could stand. It was a law far older, far deeper, than his own people's creed of survival. And it was why these fragile beings had claimed the stars. Caruel rose on unsteady legs. He bowed his head to the cub and its kin, a gesture no predator of his kind had ever given to prey. For in his heart, he no longer saw them as prey at all. He saw them as something greater. And as he turned back toward the wilderness, leaving the humans to their reunion, he carried with him a new truth. The strongest are not those who stand alone, but those who guard, and are guarded in turn.